Welcome to this bonus episode of One for the Road. Normally, I sit down with guests to share their recovery journeys, but today's conversation is slightly different. We're exploring the powerful link between poverty and addiction, two challenges that can shape lives in many ways people never see. Joining me today are two very special guests. First, Mike Gidney, CEO of Kind Direct. Right. Joining me are two very special guests. First, Mike Gidney, CEO of In Kind Direct, a charity that provides essential goods to families across the UK. And alongside him, Darren Langdon, Managing Director of Mirius Hygiene, who grew up in poverty, later faced his own struggles with alcohol and is now living in sobriety. Welcome both. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank
I'm
you,
going to
Dave.
start with you, Mike. Mike, can you paint a picture of what poverty looks like in the UK today? And what are some of the hidden struggles families face that most of us don't realise?
Well, thank you for having us on, Dave. It's a topic for us all to talk about because poverty it's on the increase in the UK and it shouldn't be. So it is a significant problem now. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which researches poverty right across the country, 2 out of every 10 adults are in poverty. 3 out of every 10 children are in poverty, and that number is growing. And with the economy as challenging as it is, and with the debates about what the government can or cannot afford in terms of benefits, this is a problem which is affecting so many people, and it isn't being solved. And what we do in In-Kind Direct, well, we focus on helping anybody in need, but we have a particular focus on people experiencing hygiene poverty. And what I mean by that is, well, I mean, hygiene poverty is not being able to afford the everyday essential products that, many of us would take for granted, like soap or toothpaste or loo roll, cleaning products. And according to, again, to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, 4.1 million households last year had to go without essential products. I mean, it's just an incredible number. And from our own research at In Kind Direct, where we've researched children's experience of hygiene poverty, we know that we know that four children in every classroom experience hygiene poverty. That means that they're sharing toothbrushes. It means that they are perhaps they don't have the materials to keep clean, to keep themselves clean and well. They're worried about being smelly at school and being bullied for that. I mean, it is a really significant problem. Part of the reason why we focus on hygiene poverty is, I mean, people talk a lot about food banks in the UK, and we know that food poverty is a problem, people having to choose between heating and eating. But very often, by the time people have been referred to a food bank, or they've been given they've referred themselves, they will already have gone without these essential products, things that we just take for granted. And so at In Kind Direct, we try and tackle the problem at that stage to help people when they're at their most vulnerable. But it's a scandal that shouldn't exist, and we're determined to try and stop it.
Those statistics are horrendous, aren't they? So, what do you do at In Kind Direct to do that, support people?
Well, we work with companies. We get companies to donate products. So Darren, who'll be talking to us in a minute from Mirius, is one of our superstar commercial partners who donate products to us. So we're a charity. In Kind Direct's a charity, and we take products from companies who will donate them, and we distribute them to a network of just over 7,000 community groups and charities across the UK. I mean, really frontline groups. So primary schools, food banks, scout groups, sometimes homeless shelters, refugee centres, women's refuges, a whole range of frontline groups who just need essential products to give out to their service users. And the number of people who are coming to us for support is increasing at a rate that actually we're struggling to cope with. And that's in response to the fact that poverty is on the increase, as I say, and and the government isn't doing enough about it. The economy isn't growing enough. So actually, where do you go? What do you do? And one of the things that I think it's important for all of us to talk about is this is a problem that could affect anybody. Any one of us is only a couple of problems away from being in that situation ourselves, and it isn't something which shouldn't be talked about. It isn't something that happens to other people. It belongs to all of us as a problem, and it belongs to all of us to try and find the solution. So what we do in Kind Direct is try to forge those partnerships between well-intentioned companies who want to be part of the solution, community groups who want to help provide a service to the service users and the service users themselves. So actually, we can all do this together.
Mm. It's amazing what you do. And me and Darren came to your offices, and when you spoke about hygiene poverty, it's something I hadn't really thought about. We all know about food banks, but it's quite scary, isn't it?
Well, it's something which I think there's also a little bit of shame about it. People don't really want to talk about it. So if you've had to go without deodorant, or you haven't washed your hair, or quite often what you'll hear about is people who have maybe one or two of these essential products, but they won't have all of them. So kids might have to wash their hair in soap rather than shampoo, which makes your hair it just doesn't work in the same way, right? So particularly with young people, the research that we've done in Kind Direct shows that they feel like they're standing out. They feel like they're standing out for the wrong reasons. And actually, what you'll see is kids will start to duck out. They'll start to opt out of certain situations. So they'll opt out of doing PE or games because they haven't got anything to clean themselves up with afterwards. They'll opt out of sitting next to their mates, and even when they're young, how kids will sit quite close together when they're playing a game or looking at someone's phone or something. They'll opt out of doing that. They'll distance themselves from the rest of the group. And also, if they feel like they don't smell the same, it's as simple as that. They feel like they don't belong.
Mm,
And that is a pattern which starts quite early in life and can continue into adulthood. And it can create cycles of marginalization and exclusion, which are really damaging to people's mental health. So, finding a way of solving this problem, the problem of hygiene poverty, as just one manifestation of a bigger problem of poverty, is a really important thing for all of us to grapple with.
mm. Yeah, I mean, you talking there, I can think of several situations in my childhood that I witnessed that. But I want to bring in Darren. Thank you, Darren, for being kind enough to share your story around your experience of poverty. Do you want to tell us all how it was for you?
No problem. Thanks for having us, Dave. It's a big question. Growing up in poverty. So I grew up in a city, Coventry. So in an area that had lots of challenges with social issues, crime, alcohol, drugs. Both my parents worked, so we were a working family, mum and dad. My mum worked two jobs for most of the time that I can remember. So weekends were rarely time spent with both parents. And as Michael said, really, you're only one or two events away from having these types of problems. And from a really young age, I was acutely aware of how close to the poverty line that we were. My dad working in various firms, construction and different industries in the 80s were hit by layoffs and strikes. So long periods without work. And that was acutely challenging for us as a family because I was aware that we were really, really close at any given point not to having, the essentials, be that the food we wanted to eat, and certainly the clothes that we wanted to wear. And again, picking up on Mike's point there with being young and at school, it meant that from a very young age I was incredibly anxious and insecure. Again, knowing that tomorrow isn't given and life could be a little bit difficult. I remember feeling, terrified that I'd be ill, which sounds an odd thing to say, but I'd hear people cough at school and I wouldn't want to get close because I didn't want to have to tell my mum I couldn't go to school because I was aware that that would mean that a day off work and a day without pay. So it was a challenge. I can certainly understand the feeling of sort of standing out at school. Again, new trainers just wasn't a thing. New clothes, not really a thing, and absolutely not bikes and other gifts really. So it sort of drives isolation to a degree, and not wanting to get as involved with the with your peers as perhaps you might had you not had those sort of challenges to think about, really.
Was there any part of that time that you felt bullied by them, or was it your own kind of isolation? Because I remember growing up myself that my mum worked in a factory and my dad was a lorry driver, and we always had second-hand clothes growing up, And I remember being in a shoe shop in Rose Hill, and all the kids were wearing like the moccasins with the latest things in, right? And my mum gave me a choice, and she said, I can't really afford the moccasins, but what do you want, this pair or that pair? And I went for the cheaper pair because I wanted to save my mum money, but I knew as well that I'll be bullied at school for being a geek and a nerd. And we're going to talk about it a bit later on how that led on to me finally being accepted by drinking. But I think the poverty element was a big contribution to that because I had low self-esteem, wearing second-hand clothes, and even at a stage where the kids started wearing long trousers and I was still wearing short trousers at school,
Mm.
in the autumn and stuff like that. So did you witness anything like that?
I think I became a master at camouflage, if I'm honest. So I didn't particularly get to the point where I felt bullied. It was more an internalization. I think because I was so aware of it that I managed to navigate it. So I'd sort of dive out of situations. So going back after Christmas, I'd try and avoid that because then people were talking about what presents they got, knowing that if I can avoid it for a couple of days, those conversations, would die off. It got worse the older I got. So when you sort of get to around 14, 15, where your peer groups sort of change and mature a little bit, that was more challenging, for sure. But I think again, being from the area that I grew up, I was with the right crowd to not to be bullied, to be honest.
Yeah, and you're a big man as well. So imagine when you were 14 or 15, it was a bit
I
of a
was.
lump.
That's
But how did
probably
that
true.
affect your self-esteem growing up?
Um, it, it 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 was challenging, Dave. I think, and that led into adult life because I think it led to a degree of a number of sort of personality traits that some have been positive, or at least I thought at the time. Things like I had an incredibly high work ethic because there was this drive, the resilience that it drives in to keep going. I didn't sort of back away from that. So I think it gave me a degree of resilience. But in terms of my sort of self worth, kind of feeling like you're not good enough.
Mm,
I reconnected with an old school friend recently, someone I grew up with from when I was 3, haven't seen since we were sort of 15 or 16. And we met up and had a coffee and walked around, the area that we grew up. And sort of in adult life now, you look and you think there was, areas that just weren't for us, not children like us. There was a university being built at the end, literally at the end of our street, and we knew, you know, we knew from a very early age that wasn't for us. That was for other people to come to our city, and go to that university. So it on sort of a social level in terms of my peer group, we were in a cohort of people that felt the same. And I think as an individual, um, it kind of led to a degree of issues with self worth. Am I really worth as much as somebody else? And that did drive into adult life, and has been something that I've had to pick up and deal with. But yeah, I guess it shows those interactions and issues during early childhood actually sitting here at 47 still play through.
shapes you, doesn't it? So
100%, Dave. 100%.
for me, it was that feeling of not being accepted, not having the right clothes, not having the branded trainers, not fitting in. The way I could fit in was by having a drink up the shops, and 2 drinks in, I was funny. And then they said, actually, you're not a nerd, you're not a geek, you're one of us now.
Mm.
And that's how there's such a strong link with poverty and addiction, isn't there? Because we're based off low self-esteem, low self-worth, and then the constant people pleasing and need to fit in. Did
Yeah,
you find that?
100%. I mean, alcohol was part of my life from as early as I can remember. The first memories, every male in my family and in the area that I grew up, all drank, all went to the pub, all went to the working man's club, regularly, if not every night, certainly most of the week. And it was almost something then that as a young man you aspired to do. So
Mm,
you'd look at these adults and think, oh, I can't wait till I'm old enough to go to the pub, and it's only in adult life that I look back and I think, well, we didn't have a lot of money, and yet, parents were choosing to spend money on things that added no value.
mm,
And how do you square that? And I think for a period there was a bit of resentment from me until I sort of really worked at it and kind of got to the point where actually it was just their way of numbing out. They had the same issues that we're talking about, probably worse when they were growing up, and that was just their way of dialing out.
mm.
But you're right. I mean, you sort of then get to the age of sort of 14, and you can take your first drink with your friends, down a park, and that very quickly, certainly in those days, escalated to being at the pub at 16 with older men,
Yeah, and
playing pool and living a very young adult life at a
yeah,
point you probably shouldn't be.
no ID required, just
Not at
going
all.
in and being under the wing of an adult that was buying you pints
Yeah.
and, playing darts. And so, Mike, from your perspective, poverty, shame, and addiction often feed off each other. So, what are your thoughts on this?
It's something which we recognise in Kind Direct. 1 in 4 children report feeling low self-esteem. So what you're talking about, Darren, is something which is so common. So
Mm.
and I mean really hard to hear and really distressing, but it's really common. And part of what we need to recognise as a society is how do we help 1/4 of our kids who are feeling like they've got low self-esteem? Because what you're saying, Darren, about how you then sort of opt out of things and you start to exclude yourself from things, like you were saying about like that university at the end of your street isn't for you. That's so wrong and it's so damaging. It's so damaging for all of us as a society. And I think part of the problem is people don't think about it enough, right? When we look at what the government, so like there's lots of government debates around, welfare reform and the 2-child benefit cap and all this kind of stuff. But they're coming at it, I think, almost like an accountancy exercise. What can we afford and what can we not afford? I think you should come at it from a human community point of view, which is if 1/4 of our kids in this country are feeling like they've got low self-esteem, that's 1/4 of the next generation. We cannot let this lie. It has to be changed. And what you're talking about, both of you, about sort of your feelings of like how important it is to sort of feel like you belong. Again, in Kind Direct, we see it time and time again. One of my first visits when I started working here was to Telford Crisis Centre, and one of the things that they support is they have some of their service users are homeless men in the Telford area. And they say that one of the things they like most in terms of products they get from us is when their homeless service users get branded products. So not just basic soap or something, but actually that they get some really cool cosmetics that other people are wearing. Just like a bit of deodorant, a bit of aftershave. I mean, just fairly basic stuff. But that sense of belonging, that sense of this posh stuff is also for me. It isn't just for other people. Is incredibly important in terms of building social cohesion and creating that sense of community. We work on more than hygiene products. We also provide a lot of things for children and young people. And of course, when kids get trainers, when we're able to provide branded trainers or cool shoes, like you were talking about, Dave, it makes all the difference in the world.
Mm,
And that fear of standing out for the wrong reasons, I think, is such a toxic, such a damaging force in society.
mm,
And what's also so frustrating about it is that we can solve it quite easily. We can solve it if companies support charities to get the products where they're most needed. So we don't have to wait for government to come up with the kind of accountancy answers around budgets. The stuff that we can do today that makes a massive difference.
mm. and it's raising awareness because I say we came on Monday and we listened to a wonderful talk and that and I, like from my I don't know what Darren has to say about it, but from my perspective, when you started talking about hygiene poverty, I did think back to when I was growing up and 13, 14 years old when you're interested in girls and you didn't have the I'm showing my age here, Mike, by the way, but Koros and Paco Rabanne, like
I remember
uh,
those.
but Fahrenheit, I suppose, that those aftershaves and you got the cheap deodorants and that, and it can make a big difference to your confidence, can't it?
You're totally right. Well, in Kind Direct, we did some research with young people earlier in the year, as I was saying, about their experiences of growing up in hygiene poverty. And one of the really interesting things was that it isn't just the fear of smelling, of having, like feeling dirty. That's really important, but it's not just that. It's also that the kids want to smell like their mates. So if you're a 13-year-old boy and all of your mates are covered in Lynx Africa, which is like this generation's version of Kuros and Paco Rabanne, like you're saying, Dave, if you don't smell of Lynx Africa, then you stand out, and kind of
Yeah,
people are pointing at you.
yeah,
So and you know how hypersensitive you are at that age as well. You look for any
yeah,
cue, any signal to show that you don't belong, and that can absolutely compound a lack of self-respect, a lack of self-worth, it can stay with people, all their lives.
yeah. It's an awful thing to say, but I remember at school as well that the nicknames that go around. There was a kid. He was called Bo because he smelt a bo. And well, as an adult, it's shocking, isn't it? But we can be quite brutal as kids, can't we? And that is the basic like hygiene needs of washing and being clean as well. Like you mentioned earlier about using soap to wash your hair, and we're all so self-conscious going to school, aren't we? And we got like hair which isn't quite right, and it's
Completely, and it's also something which kids themselves are so acutely aware of. So, I mean, one of the most sort of troubling bits of the research that we did with young people was, particularly with girls, they would rather forego food,
mm,
go without food, than go without the kind of things that keep them feeling fresh and clean. Now, that's so dangerous, and this is the real experience of people who are just not able to make ends meet. And of course, one of the really most sort of sobering things about the increase of poverty in the UK in recent years is the increase in the number of people who are on benefits but who are working. They've got jobs, they're in work, they still can't make ends meet, and that's something as a society we cannot ignore.
mm. Darren, do you think poverty and addiction are judged with the same stigma? Because there's such a lot of stigma around.
I,
Um,
I do, yeah. I mean, they're both uncomfortable topics for a lot of people. Um, so I do think that there's a very close similarity in terms of how people are judged in either way. Both as children and adults. I mean, Mike's just said about working parents on benefits. That the perception would be you know it's people that aren't working or aren't contributing to society, and it's just not the case.
mm,
And it's that stigma. It's the self-forgiving prophecy, isn't it? Because from stigma forms isolation. Isolation, increases the chances of addiction. It's these things that just work as a little wheel, and it's a little bit like um, you know the mice on the wheel. Just their legs can be turning like hell, but they just can't get anywhere. You know, and it's about giving them the opportunity, stopping that wheel spinning, taking them off that treadmill and saying, look, is a different opportunity. Have you considered, how can we help you get out of this situation that you found yourself in?
mm,
And as Mike said earlier on, any of us are only, and I say this to people all the time, we can all sit at any given point. You're only two or three life events away from, being in that position. So I think actually looking at both alcohol, addiction, and poverty in terms of the same actual look at it with compassion, and look at it with understanding why people might be where they are and actually thinking, look, what can I do to help?
mm,
What can we do to help? Rather than take a view of, "Oof, either I don't understand," because it's actually an uncomfortable topic as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, a lot of my listeners know my story of Eastbourne,
Yeah,
where I was 5, 6 nights on a beach, and I was so drunk I was leaning against a wall about 3 o'clock in the morning, delirious, didn't even know where I was, and a girl got out of a black cab and called me a effing loser. And I thought, a week ago I was in Chelsea in Cadogan Place measuring up a £5 million flat for carpet, and a week later I'm against a wall, paralytic, and I hadn't had a shower or wash for five
probably
days.
judged as homeless.
Well, I
Yeah,
think she thought, and I looked
yeah,
homeless as well because I literally hadn't washed or anything. I just drank for 5 days and slept rough on the beach. So as you say, it's you're 2 or 3 moments away from that, and you could
yeah.
be in a job and lose your job or lose a retainer, you know, or you're only round the corner sometimes, and this
You
is
know, if
why it's
a family illness, somebody needs you to take care of them, a poorly child. It really is. It's close.
yeah, and this is why it's so important.
Mm.
How for you, Darren? You've stopped drinking, haven't you?
Yeah,
How different is your life now?
it's massively different, Dave. I mean, I grew up with alcohol as around me as a child, and then into early adulthood. So it was the acceptable thing to do. It was the expected thing to do, and I think it for me became a very comfortable crutch. Um, and running a business, having a young family, that crutch sometimes got larger and larger and larger, not wanting to bring things home. And again, it sort of led me into that same degree of isolation that I felt growing up. And hit the point where I thought, look, I've got to take control of this, and I've got to reframe that relationship that I've got, and which I've done, with listening to podcasts and educating myself, and working with your good self, Dave. And I guess what it's given me is a number of things, but clarity and time. It gives you that time to think, and clarity of thought, that emotional dysregulation that you don't realize you've got until you take something away, and then you get that
Mm,
steady emotional regulation back, and it gives you that time then to think, and plan. So it's given me a hell of a lot, and it's given me capacity is the other thing I'd say. So I mean, I thought I was busy before. Again, running a business, having two young children, and a wife to look after, but there's always capacity to do more if you structure yourself well, and capacity to do things like this,
yeah,
you know, which is
I,
important.
yeah, I know. And when we left Incline Direct on Monday, we were full of ideas, weren't we? And
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, it was such a great morning there. Thanks, Mike, for inviting us.
Yeah.
And I'd like to kind of close the conversation. Really, is this can start at ground level, can't it, Mike? It's like it doesn't have to be big organisations donating things, getting the word out. It can be from ground level. And how can people listening to this podcast help Incline Direct?
Oh, well, I mean, you're completely right, Dave. I mean, this is all about community, right? So this is all about saying, actually, this is a problem we can solve if we pull together. So Darren and Miriam do fabulous work, and we're so proud to be sort of working with them. But companies donating products to us, and we pass them over to community groups. But some of those community groups are literally, a couple of people doing whatever they can do in their particular community, providing a community hub, a community space. And what I love about it is it's a really practical solution to the problem. And it's basically saying, no, we're not going to put up with this. We're not going to put up with this, the rising risk of more people falling into poverty and not being able to keep themselves clean. And then all of the associated problems that go with that about exclusion in later life. We're not going to put up with it. And creating sort of just local opportunities to work together. So if people want to get involved, I'd say, first off, search In-Kind Direct, have a look at who we are. On our website, search hygiene poverty, because the first thing I think people need to we need more people just to understand the scale of the problem. That's the first thing. So the first thing is awareness, right? Just understand that this is a really big problem in the UK, bigger than it's been in years, and it doesn't need to be like that. We can do something about it. And then, periodically, In-Kind Direct has we have campaigns in Tesco's and other supermarkets where you buy two products and a third one gets donated to us. That generates millions of products. It really does. It generates loads of products for us to be able to pass on to for these frontline community groups. But equally, spread the word, get more people involved. There are other organisations like Hygiene Bank as well, where every now and then you'll see a promotion in Boots where you can put a product in a bin in one of the collection bins in Boots, and they get passed on as well. The most important thing is to know about it. Talk to you. Don't let's not any of us be ashamed about it, right? It happens. It happens. It could happen to any of us. Let's get it known, get it talked about, and then when you get an opportunity to do something by buying a product which gets passed on, please do. It makes the most enormous difference.
Amazing. That's perfect. So inspirational. Thank you so much, Mike, for
Thank you.
joining us today. And Darren, do you want to round it off with anything?
I'd echo Mike's thoughts. I mean, the brilliant thing about In-Kind Direct from our perspective as a business donating products, it's actually national and local. So their logistics setup is absolutely second to none. So we can give in bulk, but actually it gets distributed locally. So our employees who work at the site in Coventry, they're aware that Coventry Clothing just down the road are receiving products that they've made in our factory. So
Yeah.
you get that both, the double hit of being able to do something on a much larger scale with the logistics setup that In-Kind have got, but still keep that local feel as well.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, both of you, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to put all your details on the show notes, Mike, so
Thanks,
people
Dave.
can reach you direct. And please share this episode as well if it resonates with you. I think it's the more people we can get it to, the more impact it have. Thank you both so much, and hopefully we meet for one of those lovely breakfasts again soon.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.